Just out of curiosity, how many people out here are from the enterprise, the industry? Show of hands. All right. And then how many are developers from the AR industry, providers of some variety? Okay, great. I was just curious to see what our audience mix was today. So we're CN2. We are an enterprise content creation and collaboration platform for the enterprise. Oh, great. There we go. We are focused on content. So historically, this has been a very complicated medium to develop for. Lots of issues around it, and at CN2, we are focused on shortening that timeline. We have developed an easy-to-use platform, wizards, translators, and all sorts of interesting things that I'll show you today. And so this is really what our focus is. A little bit of our history. I started the company out of Georgia Tech. My background is in learning technologies. We've won some really nice awards over the years. Raised around the capital in 2014. Most recently, we were awarded what we think is a really important patent in XR in January, moving back and forth between AR, VR for enterprise applications. We've got another filed, a couple more in the pipeline. Selected for the Dell Entrepreneurs Network this year. But one of our most exciting things that has happened is we were selected by SAP for their New York Foundry in 2018. So I'm working out of that office right now and have a lot of very interesting work going on there. I think you'll see why that's relevant. We've had the great fortune of working with large companies from our inception. When I went to look at the SAP opportunity, I came to the realization that every customer that CN2 has is an SAP customer. And I thought this presented a very, very interesting opportunity. They've given us a lot of support. And I thought it would be interesting to take a look at some of our earliest work to see how we've come up with what we think the best utilization of XR for the enterprise is and how we arrived at this conclusion. So Coca-Cola was one of our first customers, and one of the first things that we did was develop a sales tool for them. Obviously, driving revenue is really important. We wanted to help them get more coolers and more revenue through these retail outlets, allowing customers to visualize what the coolers were going to actually look like in their physical location and to be able to populate those coolers with planograms. So we developed a configuration tool that's part of our platform today, but the configuration tool was originally designed to change the exterior of the coolers, to populate it with content, to switch out brands and do that sort of thing. I'll show you some other examples later on in my presentation of how we use that configuration tool today. But we wanted to aggregate all this data so that our customers could really see how our applications drove value. And initially, we did this through just sending a simple email. So you'd see what people selected and then see that information in an email. The next thing that we did for Coca-Cola was a service and training application. So we started with sales and marketing. We moved into service and training. This is a partnership between Coca-Cola and a company called Thermoplan. Thermoplan makes these barista-style machines. They put them in retail outlets all over. The technicians aren't particularly trained on this particular device, and so they needed instructions on how to go out and service these in the field. We put in all sorts of interesting things like the labels that you see there we call dynamic tags. They have qualities to them like object avoidance. We integrated the concept of being able to order parts out of the app and superimposing animations onto the physical equipment so that the technician could see how this equipment would operate if it was actually getting power at that moment. We also put in the notion of a digital bill of materials. And so perhaps we would want to be able to see all the parts at any given time, understand what they are, and get more information about them. And so here is our digital bill of materials. And then the notion of being able to use detecting state to see if something's wrong. So if we start off with a model, and then what we're looking at differs within a certain percentage, being able to identify that difference and then, again, communicate it early on via an email. The third thing that we did for Coca-Cola was a very, very early concept for remote assistance, which everybody's talking about. And this very early concept, instead of diagramming into 3D space and doing the things that we traditionally think of with remote assistance, we allowed a sales team to remotely place 3D models, which are coolers in this instance, so that a customer could visualize what a product would look like in their space. They could simply stand in their retail outlet, hold up a tablet, and the remote expert, which you see, this is our customer, being guided as to what to do long before AR Kit and the great computer vision tools that we have today. But standing in their retail outlet, wanting to envision where this equipment's going to go, and our subject matter expert or our salesperson who's remotely located could drop this physical equipment in. And there he is. He's interacting with the equipment and allowing the customer to see it. So very early concepts of remote assistance. So these projects were done over 6 years ago, and here we are 6 years later, and I still truly believe that the full life cycle of the product is really what about XR is for the enterprise. And that is our insight for CN2, which is sales and marketing, experience, which is service and training, and this notion of remote assistance that can be layered into these experiences in a variety of different ways. So we all know these numbers, huge projections of where this market's supposed to go and all the money we're supposed to be able to make with it. But the real question is, how do we move past the POC in AR? There's tons of companies out there. If you're in industry, you've probably done it. You've got an innovation fund. You've created this stuff. But how do we get it really integrated into the enterprise so that these numbers happen and all the magic of this technology really drives revenue, increases performance, and delivers on all the promises that it's claimed to offer? So I believe it comes down to two things. One is scalable content creation, which we are focused on at CN2, and I'm going to show you some examples of that. But I truly believe that the second part of it, the reason that we're at SAP I/O, is end-to-end integration into the enterprise. If you're aggregating all this data, if you're not tying it in to that end-to-end business solution, it's very difficult to justify the expense, the effort, and the change in process that you have to go through to really make this part of your day-to-day business. So for the first time, we have a lens in between the customer or the worker and all of this fabulous data. It is the data aggregation tool of the future. But what best practices do you need to have in place so that you can really aggregate this data? So my best practice, number one, is work with the equipment that you have today. To think that you're going to go in and create a new solution and require an enterprise to go out and make a major investment in all new hardware should not be where they start from. Select a solution that's going to allow you to use the investment the enterprise already has today, whether it's in telephones, tablets. Certainly we support all wearable devices and believe that it's the future, but you should be able to work with the hardware that you have, because different hardware has strengths in different areas. A tablet's much better to use in a training scenario than a pair of glasses. So we're going to look at some case studies, and I'm going to kind of walk you through what we do at CN2 and some of our solutions. So the first case study that we're going to look at is a public utility. And they have such a wide variety of equipment, right? They've got all this legacy equipment that's been around forever. They have a new generation of equipment where they certainly want to be able to provide some training for, and then they have what they believe is their future. There's a whole body of content that goes around with this, right? And so they need a way to take what they've already created and turn it into these applications. And they may not want to use augmented reality or virtual reality or whatever for their oldest equipment. Maybe that just needs to be saved for the future, for the renewable energy stuff, right? The other thing is, when they go to make a development effort, there should be a single development effort. You should be able to develop content once and have it work on whatever device in whatever context you want it to work for. So at CN2, we've developed a content studio that allows the developer to make one development effort. And you'll see our tools over here on the left-hand side. We're going to start off by just going into our content management system, pulling in a CAD model, adding materials to it. Sorry. And we're going to add interface assets here. So those dynamic tags that you saw in some of the earlier examples, we're going to add some of those. Part isolations, animations. When we get this content arranged exactly the way that we would like for it to be, we are going to hit our little publish button up there on the right-hand side, and that's going to make this content instantly available to whomever we deem it accessible to. And so you'll see in just a second here, we're going to hit publish. We can geofence it. Maybe you just have a particular plant, a location. Maybe you only have products available in certain areas. By date, maybe you just want your content to be available for a certain date range. That brings us to best practice number 4. And that is, your contextuality should dictate the content that you view. So you should have a single app and be able to view it based on user rights, hardware, or the environment that you're in a variety of different ways. So if I'm standing in front of the equipment, I should see my content on the equipment. We're going to start off with a wireframe. It's going to ask me if it's correctly aligned. You see our digital compass there. It's going to always point our line of sight exactly where we need to be looking. If we've got on a pair of glasses, we might not know where to look. And we'll see our X-ray views, part isolations, and all the wonderful things that we do in our platform. And integrating things like warnings. Over there on the left-hand side, you see the little wireframe tool. That's always going to ensure that our content is perfectly aligned. We can go through an application like this in overview mode or validation mode. Overview mode is going to let us just go through and understand the application. Validation mode is going to have us physically check as we go through each one, but that same publishing effort, if I put on a different pair of glasses, should be available to me in virtual reality. So again, one publishing effort, and the content that I see is based on the contextuality, my environment, and my user permits. Maybe we need to have the same content in a training scenario. Maybe we need to have it in a C-level meeting. We need to look at it on the desktop, be able to discuss it, and have a high-level overview. Again, one app presented one way with one set of hardware in one environment, presented in virtual reality with another set of hardware, and now we're sitting in a business meeting and that same content is now right on our desktop. Maybe we're riding a train and we need to just go through the training exercise and we don't want to look at it at augmented reality or virtual reality at all. They're not the solution for everything. So in 3D mode, we can see that exact same content on our tablet right in front of us and be able to go through it in that methodology as well. And we can tie in things like documentation, which you'll see in just a second here. So if we want to be able to tie into the reference documentation, there it is. Perfectly draw parallels between the content. Again, have that lens in between the user and their material for the first time. So we know how well they perform, what their aptitudes are. Is this particular worker better than another at a particular skill set? Really aggregate what is most important for the enterprise for productivity. Or maybe it's that antiquated electric equipment that's not going away anytime soon out in the field, and all we need is heads-up display. So we can use another form factor and have that information appear right up in our heads-up display and access the same content as well. Our next product, Assist, you saw a little glimpse of how it originated. After that, we decided to really take a focus into remote assistance, adding diagramming, and that sort of thing. The video that you're going to see today was designed for a roadside assistance program. We've got somebody on the side of the road, their car's broken down. In this particular instance, she's going to be calling into a remote expert. But she also has the ability to have a expert-to-expert, mobile-to-mobile experience here as well. And so as she dials in, you'll see that she is able to diagram into 3D space. She has a whole set of tools there. We white label this for our customers so it can be their custom branded remote assistance application. Here's our subject matter expert. He's going to be receiving her call from the subject matter expert dashboard. He's able to diagram into 3D space and fully interact with her while we aggregate all this information. They go back and forth. We can add dynamic tags. You see over here on the right, we're building an annotation history of this call so that we can tie that into analytics and data and be able to go back and look at it. He's going to add some additional things into the scene. But what's most important here is up there in the top hand left corner, you see that little cube. Those instructions that I just showed you can get dropped in. So we can put a remote set of eyes on a problem. They diagnose it, identify what the problem is, and now we can drop in that type of 3D instruction to help resolve the issue. So this tool was also used for a large pharmaceutical company as a sales tool. They have labs all over the world. They sell big equipment. They can't get their customers there. They needed a way to make a WebEx meeting where they could have customers come and actually attend these facilities, walk through, diagram, that sort of thing. We added it in. Probably the most important lesson about this technology is that it drives revenue. And no matter how magical the technical experiences are and the repair and that sort of thing, at the end of the day, it's about making money. And this tool is going to be imperative to driving revenue in the future. Customers will demand being able to look at products before they buy them, to be able to visualize them in their environment, and to understand the key differentiators by pointing their magic lens at that product and understanding what makes it different. So you can walk around the show and see all sorts of examples of this here. I'll let it play for just a second and see the magic. I believe this particular one is Wikitude. Visualizing the equipment, again, that configuration tool that we saw with Coca-Cola to go in and change out the color and the branding and the drawer pulls and make the lighting happen and all the magical things that we can do. And point it at the ground here. But what's really important here is the UX. So we show you where it's going to appear, and then we tell you back up. Because if you don't back up, you're not going to understand what you're looking at. And those are all the things that make a really compelling application like this so important. And then also, being able to understand the simple nuances of what makes a product special. For instance, in this example, where it's a tape measure, and you go in to buy a tape measure, what's the difference between this tape measure and the next tape measure? Why shouldn't I buy the less expensive one? Well, did you ever notice that any time you go and try and figure out if a new piece of art is going to work in your house and you pull that tape measure out, that when the tape goes out, it falls down? That is called standout. Who knew? And it just so happens that if you buy this tape measure, it has better standout than any other tape measure in the industry. And it's going to hold up for you. It's also not going to do that irritating thing where after a while it rolls back in and it doesn't roll back in right anymore. And so you can understand that by looking at it virtually or by pointing your device at this magical tape measure and understanding what really makes it special. So as I mentioned, we tie analytics around everything to help our customers really understand how we drive value. But that's not enough. What really needs to happen is to get to that end-to-end integration. All of this data really needs to get tied into the business. It needs to get tied into the human factor, understanding how employees are performing, understanding what customers really want, all the way down to procurement, distribution, and all the other pieces that go along with this. Again, for the first time, we have this magical lens between the customer and the products out there, and we have an opportunity to glean data that we've never had before. So best practice number 7, we are starting on now with our new journey at SAP, and that's about integration. If you're interested in talking about it, I'd love to have a conversation, and thank you all so much for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. I wonder if we got time just for 1 or 2 questions?
Sure, absolutely.
Please.
Yes, it is available offline, and we have an enterprise SDK for Unity. Let's see, do you have examples of how long it took for a given company to annotate their CAD, starting annotation with your tool? The biggest challenge that we have with our customers is them actually getting the data. And a big portion of what we do is help our clients think through process, right? This requires a new internal process. So if you've got your CAD data, you can annotate it in minutes. I mean, pull the model in, add some dynamic tags to it, push it, instantly available. So it's really, that comes down to the complexity of what you're looking to create, not the complexity of the tool that we offer. Do we support Windows, considering Windows is a standard for the enterprise? So on the mobile end, we support Windows 10 devices. I didn't show it to you today, but we've done a ton of work for HoloLens. So we support HoloLens as well. So yes. Let's see, how should an enterprise effectively scale 3D asset generation? I have a whole nother presentation on that, but I'd be happy to chat with you about it. We definitely have put together a process and have done a ton of thinking around that. Does the learning curve look like for a technician with a CAD experience start annotating with your, let's see, how does the learning curve look like for a technician with CAD experience to start annotating? It looks very short. Our tool's designed for everyday web developer, skill set, kind of as an entry level. So anything above that is, is a plus. What would you suggest? Oh, it disappeared.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Again, sorry for the flu voice.
Okay, so